Welcome to Speak Up, lesson number 2. The topic is to speak and listen. This is, again, lesson number 2 from the series Look Up, Leading from Love. This session, these recordings are intended to be less than 10 minutes long. They're designed to be facilitated as part of a group or as an individual, but whether in either setting, the idea is for you to stop along the way and to consider some of the extra materials that are included or some of the discussion topics if in a group. So let's get started. The topics for this session include one is the fact that whether you intend to or not, you're already a leader. The second is to stress the point that you do have something to offer the world with your leadership and followership. We'll then talk about the idea of speaking second as opposed to speaking first. Again, whether you're a leader or a follower. And then finally, we'll wrap up with some topic about how to support leaders. Whether you've been assigned a project or a group to lead or not, if you're an adult, the chances are pretty good you're already leading. In fact, that is one definition of adulthood, is that we've been entrusted as adults to lead our families or as members of our church, as drivers of an automobile, all represent some form of leadership. It's just a characteristic of an adult, being an adult. In fact, if you've been assigned to a group at someone else's leaders, when someone else is the leader, following those folks is also a form of leadership, as we'll discuss in depth here. By that, I mean that the actions that we take can create or derail progress of the group, or the momentum that the leader is trying to build in terms of moving towards the building of relationships or the completions of tasks. And likewise, the inactions or things that we fail to do can create or derail progress. So we'll talk a bit more about that as we go along, but it's just important to recognize that the fact that we're leading, we need to recognize that the things we do affect the people around us, and that's in effect leadership. And it's essential to be aware of that, so that the relationships that we're building and the tasks and the projects that we work together to do builds healthy relationships. It's a really important topic, and as we talk about speaking and listening, I guess probably the most fundamental, important part for people of faith is prayer. Because really prayer is a way to organize our thoughts and settle our hearts and to speak to God and then to actually listen. So it's probably the most foundational example of where speaking and listening and as a form of leadership is important in what we call prayer. The first thing to realize before you speak or as you prepare to speak, and it goes to the earlier points made, is that you have something to offer. You were put on this earth to grow into your current circumstances because God created you to fill a hole in this world that's shaped like you. And it's very important that we prepare ourselves and step into that hole as best we can. We have limitless relationships and visions and actions that are possible if we are properly led and we step into the right circumstances. And we lead or follow as it's indicated that we should. So it's something we should embrace and not really avoid. That something to offer may well be built from the fact that you've been at the hand of difficult leaders or tyrannical leaders, perhaps even. And from those troubles, we can learn things and learn about how to lead from a positive or a negative sense. So the fact that you don't feel like you've really been at the hand of an exceptional leader. The fact that you haven't might, in fact, be exactly the foundation for you to be an extraordinary leader yourself. We can learn to follow or lead by following leaders that are good, or we can learn by following leaders who aren't. So, it's early to say that the fact that you've had troubles or that you've had to interact with difficult leaders that you're not in a position to follow and do it well or to lead. It's just really important to know that you do have something to offer. And regardless if it's following or leading, and your words and your actions do make a difference when you're present in the scenario with other people where you're leading or following. One thing that happens a lot as people are in a position to lead is to remember that people who are healthy in mind and heart are pulling for you and they're on your side. So even if you're formally leading a group, keep that in mind. It's a really important thing that's important to recall. That's helpful. And even if people in a group are being disruptive or don't seem to be cooperating, they may just in fact be building relationships. And And building relationships are a very important part of that as well. So just keep in mind that people are on your side, generally on your side as a leader. And if you're a follower, again, as we'll talk through this presentation, there's circumstances where you'll step into leadership roles temporarily by speaking up. And in fact, when you speak up and make your thoughts known, you are in fact leading. And the other people in the room are on your side as well. It may at times seem like they're not, because they're building relationships, and they may throw a wisecrack or something like that, but it doesn't mean that they're resisting you or against you. Just wait out your time, and you'll get an opportunity to express yourself. Healthy people are on your side. One other idea about when to speak and when to listen, when to remain silent, is that the concept of speaking second. For people of faith, it's important to remember that John the Baptist came before Jesus. John the Baptist came and basically spoke first and brought the news that Christ was coming, and all the story of John the Baptist, and Jesus actually showed up second. In fact, it's fair to say that if a visionary person who's a visionary, and you've all encountered visionaries, are people who have really good ideas, and good ideas, to be blunt, are a dime a dozen. What's difficult is to find the people who can execute and lead correctly, or lead things forward and take that good idea forward. So a person who's a visionary who brings forward an idea, and if the idea falls flat and no one speaks up in support of the idea, that absence of that second speaker has made that vision just basically a dream that'll never come to fruition. I think a really important aspect of this is projects or programs that are extremely successful. You can usually point to the person who's just on fire about the idea, who's just taken it and embraced it, and they're just determined to lead it, to see it through success. And when an idea is floated and it comes up in a group setting or a meeting, and a visionary, a person with an idea, throws it out there, and no one speaks second to step up to support or lead or reinforce it, or even support the person who says they want to lead it, the absence of that second speaker is an example of a dream that is going to fall flat without someone speaking up second. So keep that in mind as you consider what you have to offer, is that when other people are bringing forward ideas, you just don't find yourself in a position later that you recall the meeting where someone had a really good idea that just died on the vine and never gained momentum. And stop and ask yourself, did you speak up in support of the idea to help build momentum, or did you remain silent? That's an example of where inaction can actually cause a good idea to die. If you hear an idea you support, speak up in support of it. If you hear an idea that lights your fire and you want to lead it, speak up and ask to lead it. It's very important to look at it that way. Speaking second is probably the most important single attribute of a strong leader that develops the momentum and the power that's needed to drive things forward and to get things done. It's important to remember also that listening over time builds understanding, and it builds relationships. A person in a meeting that just talks and talks and never actually stops to listen to someone really isn't likely to move beyond just the visionary stage into action, and because they don't allow people to speak second. So it's very important to listen, whether you're a leader or not, because when you're putting your ideas out there, you have to listen to understand if momentum's being built, or if momentum is derailing. Very important to think about it that way. Finally, if you think about it, if you're leading, or if you're in a meeting and you're voicing your opinion, if you recognize that people are putting effort into understanding you, they're being very respectful of you, and it really feels good to see that people are giving you that respect, and that strengthens the relationship. Anytime there's leadership going on, or there's work being done, relationships are being built or disintegrating, and respect is being earned and built, and listening and putting in effort, asking questions until you understand what somebody's trying to communicate, is a really strong form of strong respect. Keep that in mind, not only as you're speaking, that when people are asking you questions, they're not challenging you necessarily, they really are giving you respect, and they're trying to understand what you're saying. And sometimes things that are really obvious to us, when we communicate them, we have to restate them 2 or 3 times before it connects with people what you're thinking. And then finally, if there are disruptions to meetings, and it's inevitable there are, because as we're progressing towards tasks and completion of tasks, and people will step outside of that and work on relationships. So it'll show up as wisecracks or funny comments, or just kind comments and words of encouragement. But sometimes like a joke or something, and especially if it's a good joke and everyone starts laughing, it can knock the momentum off track that a speaker or someone's attempting to take forward. Don't take it necessarily as though someone was attempting to knock you on track. They just moved into a relationship building mode, and that's a very healthy thing to have happen. So just take your time, and when the opportunity presents itself, just restate your position and get it back on track. It's also important to think about, when you're speaking second, as a follower, you chime in and speak second, you're supporting other participants as well. As I mentioned previously, that if a good idea is brought forward, it's just really incumbent on anyone who supports the idea to speak up and say so, because the absence of a second opinion in support and the silence actually deteriorates the momentum. And if the intent is that the idea should die, and not every idea needs to get legs, but if an idea needs to die, the best way to make it die is for no one to speak up in support. Kind of a strange corollary to that would be that if there's an idea that's thrown out there that's really not a good idea, you may give support to the person's effort that they put in there. But be careful about throwing your support behind an idea that you really don't think is a good idea. In fact, you shouldn't do it, because that's how sometimes a bad idea can attempt to get legs, and it just leads to a lot of frustration on the part of people who are taking it forward. So you can throw your support behind a person who's voicing an idea that you don't support, and just leave it at that if you'd like. And if you feel strongly that an idea should not progress, it's a good idea to gently try to put things back on track. It's just part of that respect for one another and interaction as we build relationships and move forward on things of value. Consider your nonverbal communication. Everybody's seen the eye roll or the deep sigh or thing. There's nonverbal things that we can do that will help, that will build, or we can sit up straight in our chair or nod our head or things like that to build positive momentum on an idea that we support. But if an idea is, if we're shaking our head or sighing, or someone just for some reason other than the idea at hand, maybe we're just tired, consider that can have an effect on the momentum of the idea. It's all part of speaking. Nonverbal communication is all a type of speaking, and we need to consider it as we're interacting in a group. It's also a good idea to avoid what I'm calling brick wall and absolute statements. And these are statements that just flatly say this is the way something is, and there's no further discussion required. Examples might be things like, "Oh, we've tried that before," or "That's so-and-so's job," or "That's we will not do this," or "We will not do that." There may be some things that are illegal or something like that require an absolute or a brick wall statement, but they should be unusual. And I can tell you from experience that there's a lot of folks who just throw down brick wall statements that will stop a conversation cold and completely drive momentum to zero, unless actually it can be put down in such a way that it requires a pretty stiff argument to get momentum moving again. And then relationships are beginning to suffer, things like that. So again, in the concept of leading from love, it's not necessary to throw walls up and obstacles up. If an idea is good, let's help move it forward. If it's not good, let's discuss it further. It may be that we're the one that don't understand what the idea is and the value of it without further discussion. Strive for momentum on good ideas and help build ideas forward. And that gets into the interaction and the conversations around understanding what someone's saying, and then helping to build on an idea. That's again a form of speaking second. When someone has a good idea, to build on the idea a bit and then build on that and build on that. And that's how good ideas really get legs and can get going. It's also essential to ask these questions that you need. If you don't understand what something's going on, and maybe an idea, you don't understand an idea, or it sounds like a bad idea, ask some questions until you fully understand it so you can declare your position. It's really important to support leaders. If you've been assigned to a group as a follower, it's important to support the leaders in the effort, and all the things I've talked about so far are a form of doing that. It takes a lot of time and effort to lead a group. People, you may step into a 30-minute or 1-hour meeting, but it may well be that it took an hour or two of preparation for that leader to get ready for the meeting. So really, it's good to support, and all the things about speaking second, speaking in support, those kind of things and keeping things on track. If someone's disruptive, or if you toss out a joke that kind of disrupts the momentum, just go ahead and put it back on track, and acknowledge the person who was speaking when the disruption occurred, so things can get started again. But just respect the fact that a leader has generally spent a lot of time. Take a minute to thank them for the time that they spent. Volunteer to help assist, setting up a meeting, cleaning up a meeting, after a meeting, preparing for a meeting, bringing snacks, whatever. Just support the leader, because it does take a lot of time and effort. Anything that helps spread that work in order to lead, you'll learn something, and you'll probably help build a better relationship with the person who's leading. There's a matter of personal power where everyone has to have power in certain situations. It's not always bad, but it can quickly become a difficult problem if a person's personal power, there's some personal grudge, if you will, between people, and that becomes the matter at hand instead of the topic at hand. So, if someone's been acknowledged as the leader of an organization, you may be an extraordinary leader yourself, but it's really a good idea to just to step back, and grant the person the authority they've been granted as the leader, and support them as we've described here. And then certainly by speaking second and speaking in support of them, helping to maintain momentum can be a way to build enormous support for your leader, and to really compel and encourage a person to lead. That's especially true for a young leader who's given it a go, and if they're dealing with a room that's half full of seasoned leaders. A seasoned leader, being in the presence of seasoned leaders, can be very intimidating to a young person, and a seasoned leader could say some things or things that would be very discouraging. So if you see something, a mistake they're making, probably in public is not the best way to toss it out there. Help get things back on track if you can, and then maybe after the meeting, offer some suggestions to them one-on-one, so that they can listen to you and they're not dealing with the stresses of trying to keep the meeting on track. That would be a recommendation on that. Don't be a blocker. For some reason, I don't know why this is, but a topic will come up sometime, and some individual in the room, maybe it has to do with their personal power or something like that, or some rub in the past, but they will just kind of take a position where they're going to stop progress of a meeting, and they're what's called a blocker. I don't know why people do it, but if you find yourself that a meeting can't proceed, and if you stop and realize you're the reason that the meeting can't proceed, ask yourself why, and take some action to get the meeting and the program back on track. Unless you just think it's going in the absolutely wrong direction. By and large, if it's absolutely going in the wrong direction, it's after the meeting or an aside conversation afterwards, during a break or something, to talk to the leader about that, or to put things on track, rather than in public. It's part of granting the authority of the leader. It's really just very respectful and encouraging to do that for a leader who's putting the effort into leading. Keep in mind, if they weren't leading it and it's something that should be done, it could be something you would be asked to lead. And sometimes we do that. Leadership's thrust on us, and we have to lead things that may not be of that much interest to us just to get it done because it has to be done. But be thankful that someone else is leading it, and do everything you can to encourage them so that they'll lead in the future. Just help maintain the momentum and keep things on track. Leaders really appreciate it when you do that. So the essential points that we've talked about here that can be discussed, or that you're encouraged to discuss, are that the fact that you're an adult says you're leading, like it or not. Your actions or your inactions can create or impede progress. They're both applicable at some time. They're not applicable at others. Building of momentum is the key thing about speaking up, and use your voice to make yourself known, or to build momentum, or support the leadership, or support the effort. Your presence matters. You do make a difference when you speak, and you have something to offer. The world's a better place because you're here, if you consider how you're going to influence things and move them in a positive, constructive direction. The purpose of listening is to understand what somebody's saying, and it's good to speak second for the reasons we talked about here. The listening is probably one of the strongest form of respect, and the amount of effort you put into legitimately trying to understand what somebody's trying to convey is a form of very, very strong respect that does a lot to build relationships on the team, and relationships between you and the leader and other team members. Volunteer and help the leader whenever you can, and be sure to relinquish power when it's appropriate to the leader or to others in the group, and respect the process of what the leader is trying to accomplish. So I'm going to just leave this on the screen now, and you can have some discussion if you'd like. I'll leave it on the screen or a few seconds, so you can pause it if you wish to take some of these discussion topics. And finally, here's some of the resources that are available. These are YouTube The blue underlined ones are YouTube links if you're looking at the PowerPoint. If it's on the video online, you can search those on Google. These are excellent videos that pertain to the topic at hand. And the book, The Lost Art of Listening, is a bestseller from Michael Nichols. So that's the end of the discussion for Speak and Listen, lesson number 2. Be sure to jump in online and participate in the discussion forum below. That we'll learn a lot from each other. I do encourage you to back up and look at some of the resources there and have some discussion topics. I need to stop introducing these, saying that I'm going to attempt to do them in 10 minutes because it looks like this one took 20. So I promise we'll try to keep them as close to 10 minutes as possible. And I hope you enjoyed the session.